If this is not the first time you've seen me, you're probably familiar with my Maps That Can Change the Way You See the World series, where I go over all sorts of different maps about the world and what they look like. I love making those videos, but I only get 60 seconds to show you what maps I'm looking at, so I'm gonna take this video as an opportunity to show you more maps in depth and just slow down a little bit. So these first maps I'm gonna show you are the 7 deadly sins of the United States. The first map is Envy, where it shows the total thefts like robbery and burglary and Grand Theft Auto per capita. Now, the gold is the saintly and the red is the devilish. So that's the only data that they give on these maps. There's no actual numbers or measurements. So it's very interesting how the Midwest all the way into Tennessee and some of those other places there are very low. But then you see the South, like in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, and then Arizona on that bottom part. Northern California is interesting without Southern California, and then Oregon and Washington. That's very interesting. It must just be because they have lower populations. So this is gluttony, the number of fast food restaurants per capita, which is very interestingly sparse, meaning most of the country has a similar number of fast food restaurants per capita, which, to be honest, kind of makes sense when you think about these businesses calculating how many fast food restaurants that they need for the amount of people that they're gonna serve. So it would make sense a lot of the country is pretty balanced, but I see Virginia and North Carolina there on both the west and the east sides are highly populated with fast food restaurants. And then West Texas. West Texas must be because it's completely empty over there, and then along the freeways there's a bunch of fast food. That's gotta be it. But I mean, it goes up and down the state. It's very interesting. But the thing about the restaurants being balanced is actually what I'm taking from this map. This map is showing us greed, which is the average income compared with number of people living below the poverty line. So I guess this is wealth inequality for the most part around the country. And as we see, obviously California, Arizona, New York, a lot of the big, you see Chicago there, Detroit, a lot of the metropolitan areas, the Texas metropolitan areas as well, are all very unbalanced. A lot of rich people with a lot of poor people. And then the Midwest again, along with kind of the South too, all pretty balanced, I guess is how they would mark that. That little Tornado Alley there, that yellow is interesting, through Oklahoma. What is that? Oklahoma and Missouri and South Dakota. Not Oklahoma. What's above Oklahoma? That's Kansas. Yeah, Kansas and I don't, let's just go to the next one. Lust, the number of STD cases reported per capita. The South has got it going on. There's a lot of STD cases out here. I'm in Jacksonville, if you didn't know. Looks like Jacksonville, Florida down there is just outside of that zone though. But again, the Midwest, that Kansas area, also yellow, and all the way up through Minnesota. Utah and Idaho are very low with STD cases as well. The Appalachian Mountains, for some reason, just seems to not have many STD cases. This is really interesting. That little area between Texas and New Mexico. What's going on over there? What are you doing? And then one tiny little section of California. All right. Sloth. So I guess I'm assuming this is how much money is being spent based on how much money you bring in on art and entertainment. What is going on in Montana and Idaho? I guess that's because of Yellowstone and all of the national park area out there, and people are just going. But where are you spending all this money on Yellowstone? Well, I guess if you're renting out cabins and stuff, that's expensive, but is it actually expensive to just go visit the park? Very interesting. And then of course, LA is definitely that sweet dark red of sin out there, because I lived there for 10 years and there's a lot of money to be spent in that area of the country on lots of different entertainment. Texas doesn't spend money on art at all. They do not care. Wrath is showing the number of violent crimes, like the words that are listed there that I won't read, per capita. That whole Midwest is very low. That's interesting. People say a lot about Chicago having a lot of violent crime, and per capita, it is not a violent place, apparently. Meanwhile, the entire South, I love how Florida is basically completely red. Go Florida. Woo! I am the Florida man. Yeah, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, all that area on the right side of Texas. And then Northern California again with this crazy dark red. I grew up in that dark red. in the mountains. I think there's a few serial killers that come from that area, and maybe just because the population's a little lower, it just skewed very high. That one is very interesting to me. Oh wait, I just missed this. The circle in the middle of Arkansas, where they just chilling. They are fine. They're surrounded by violence, but apparently in Arkansas they're chilling. It's that Walmart power, I guess. And then finally we have pride, the aggregate of the other 6 offenses, because pride is the root of all sin. That's all right, kind of similar map to a couple of the other ones, but generally I'm gonna take this one as the sin of all sins. Are you in a sinning state? Florida. Good job, Florida. I'm so happy I moved here to this state where we just have a lot of pride. All of the South, all along, from New York all the way to Texas, all along that East Coast. There's something in the water in the Atlantic Ocean, I'm telling you. New Mexico, Arizona, California, Detroit, Washington, and Denver. I see you, Denver. You've got a little bit there going on too. Wow, North, South Dakota, all the way through the middle of the country there. You apparently just have no pride. Good for you, I guess. This map replaces US cities with European and African cities that are on the same latitude. Reykjavik is unsurprising that it is very high up in Alaska where Fairbanks would be. London being in Canada is kind of surprising to me, but not surprising. That's just wild in my head that it's actually that far north. Same things with Amsterdam and Copenhagen and Moscow. I've been to Copenhagen. It's the only one of those I've been to, but it just for some reason in my head feels like it should not be in Canada. Zurich is where Seattle is, and Athens is where San Francisco is. That's interesting. Benghazi is all the way down in Tijuana. Cairo, Egypt is in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live. That is very surprising and interesting. Does not connect in my brain at all that those 2 places are related in any sort of way. Dubai is all the way down in Miami. That one maybe makes a little more sense. Madrid and Istanbul are in Ohio and Pennsylvania, respectively. That is so funny to me. I would think that is definitely like Arizona or Southern California, just I guess because of the climates. But yeah, I mean, we're pretty far south here in the United States compared to Europe, at least. And then Naples, Italy is in New York City. So you're telling me that Naples, Florida is like 1,000 miles south of Naples, Italy, latitude-wise? That's very interesting. Interesting map. These are the major land uses for everywhere in the United States, which right off the bat, just seeing the cow pasture range section gobbling up the center of the United States is crazy. This map's a little confusing because it's set up in a way that's focused on where the type is generally used, but all of these squares are based on percentages of actual usage of land, so it's kind of in the right spot, I guess is what it's going with. The 100 largest land-owning families in Florida is crazy. Obviously, I don't think they're all in Florida, but it centers towards Florida. And the fact that percentage-wise in the United States, it takes up all of Florida, crazy. 100 people. There are what, 350 million people almost in this country, and 100 people own enough land the same size of Florida. We've got one tiny little dot for Christmas trees, which it feels small, but one tiny dot on this map for Christmas trees is actually, that's a lot of Christmas trees. Go Christmas. Gulf also, just that little section of like Charleston, South Carolina right there. That's very interesting. Gulf takes up a decent amount of the United States land, enough to make this map. Interesting that rural housing, urban commercial, and urban housing all in the top right of the United States, obviously centered around New York and the whole areas around it. That's really interesting how like kind of closely related percentage-wise they are. Wait, we have a square for wildfires. So active wildfires are maybe yearly? I don't know. This map doesn't give me that detail, but the fact that there's an entire big square for wildfires, I guess it's a subcategory mixed in with the timbers. That's not good. No. For how much money we spend on defense with taxes in the government, that's a pretty small area, but I think we put a lot of that money to work in those small areas. These next few maps show the total travel time it took to get from certain places in the United States. In 1800, it was 1 day to get, looks like outside of New York, 1 week to get to the coast of North Carolina, 2 weeks to get to Jacksonville, Florida. 5 weeks to get out towards almost Texas. Oh, I see. Okay, I was reading this wrong. So those aren't lines, those are ranges it took. And it's very interesting how they wiggle based on, I am assuming the Appalachian Mountains have something to do with this, but basically it took more than a month and a half even to get to the Midwest and off to the West Coast. 2+ weeks to get to Florida from New York. All right. 1830, 2 weeks to my Jacksonville, Florida was cut in half to 1 week. It only takes 2 weeks now to get to New Orleans instead of 4, which was on the last map. And it doesn't change too much, but that was in 30 years. This is 1857, so now we have the entire country, and it takes 3 days to get to Jacksonville, Florida now. We're just gonna stick with Jacksonville as a meter here. It takes 2 weeks to get to Texas and anywhere above that, basically. Well, wow, some of these are even like 2 weeks into all the way like to almost, is that Utah there? Yeah. 3 weeks to get to California on the very bottom. That's crazy, which I'm sure it took multiple months, like Lewis and Clark days, and then 1857, just a little bit later. And then the last one, 1930 by railroads. It took 1 day, less than a day almost, to get to Jacksonville, Florida. 2 days to get to Texas, 3 days to get to the Pacific coast. And now, I don't have the maps, but it takes a lot faster to go that all of these maps today. That was actually really interesting, the progression of how long it took to travel the country. These maps are going to show you where TV shows are the most popular around the United States. American Dad looks like it's more popular in the West Coast than the East Coast, especially because there's less, oh, is this like because there's less population on the West Coast that it's denser? I don't think so. I think we're just gonna say American Dad is a West Coast show. Grey's Anatomy, very popular in the Midwest. SpongeBob SquarePants has a lot of marks in the South, like very South Texas, very South Florida, Southern California, pretty spread out everywhere. Orange is the New Black, I guess, just wasn't very popular, except that one really dark county in Oregon. Law and Order is an East Coast show. All right, I don't even know what the first 48 is, but it is a very Southern show. I probably should ask people around here in Jacksonville. Well, Jacksonville's kind of popular, I don't know. But I'm from California, I lived my whole life out there, so I don't know what's going on in the South. Keeping Up with the Kardashians, very much in California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Miami. Interesting that it's not very popular in New York, but I guess it's kind of small there, so maybe we can't tell. The Walking Dead, look how unpopular it was in Atlanta, specifically Georgia, where it was filmed. Very white there. That South Texas area just really loves a lot of these shows. Quite popular everywhere, and very popular in the Appalachians, which I guess is kind of close to Alexandria, where some of that show took place. Of course, South Park, majorly Colorado. That definitely checks out. The Big Bang Theory, very much a Midwest show as well. I can see that. Saturday Night Live, I'm gonna take that as just, it's kind of popular everywhere. It's not really super popular in one area or another. Empire, another Southern show that I definitely have seen nothing from. So there's shows here in the South that apparently are being gate kept. Is that a term? Gate kept? They're gatekeeping Empire. Adventure Time, very much the Southwest and just the West Coast in general. Love and Hip Hop, South. I guess that makes sense. Doesn't it take place in Atlanta, or is there an Atlanta version of it? I don't know anything about Love and Hip Hop. Real Housewives of Atlanta, I guess that also makes sense that it would be in the South. Family Guy, another just popular everywhere. Game of Thrones was popular everywhere until that last few episodes there. Modern Family, another one that's just kind of, I don't know, kind of starting to look a little white on there. It's apparently not very popular. Wow, that is the most purple map that I've seen this whole time. That is very intensely on the East Coast. I also have never seen that show. Huh, I didn't think The Simpsons was such a West Coast show, and I guess Midwest up there too. Why is it so unpopular in the South and like, yeah, like Tennessee and Kentucky and all that? Do people in the South not like The Simpsons? Trying to think of a way to end this video. Oh, I know.